When you think of Maine, you probably think of lobsters, and for good reason.
Its cold waters and rocky coastline is a perfect lobster habitat.
Known for its sweet and tender meat, Maine lobsters are considered the best in the world. Over 130 million pounds of Maine lobster are caught each year.
To learn more, we took a tour on a lobster boat. Here are some things we learned about these fascinating creatures.
Lobsters have two claws, but they're not the same. One is a pincher claw, and the other is a crusher claw. The crusher claw is considered to be the dominant claw, and like us people, lobsters could be left-handed or right-handed.
More accurately, that would be left-clawed or right-clawed.
The crusher claw moves slower, but it's bigger and really strong. It has ridges that are like molar teeth, and it uses 100 pounds of pressure per square inch to crush mussel and clamshells. The other claw is the pincher claw, sometimes called the ripper claw. It's fast enough to catch fish, and while it's not as strong as the crusher, it's sharper and more precise. Lobsters use this claw to tear flesh that they eat.
Lobsters do have teeth, and they are located in their stomach.
Their stomach is right next to their mouth, and the food is actually chewed in the stomach between three grinding surfaces that look like molar teeth. These teeth are called the gastric mill.
Lobsters usually eat at night and mainly eat fresh food like fish, crabs, clams, urchins, and sometimes even other lobsters.
To grow bigger, they shed their hard shell, called an exoskeleton, in a process called molting. Before their new shell grows hard, they are very vulnerable to other predators, and they'll eat their old shell for an easy meal that they don't have to hunt for. Lobster life is rough and tumble. If a predator grabs them by a leg, claw, or antenna, the lobster has a cool trick to escape. It can auto-amputate its appendages and then later regrow a replacement. When you see a lobster with one claw much smaller than the other, it's a sign that it lost its claw in a fight and is regrowing a new one.
To help us understand more about lobster life, we visited with Chris Cash from the Lobster Institute at the University of Maine. Hi, Miss Chris.
Hi, wait, what's your name?
Alex.
Alex. Nice to meet you, Alex.
Do you
Nice
see
to
what
meet you, Neil.
do you see what she has on her mantle?
Yeah, I see. It's a lobster.
A lobster. Well,
I've got a lot of lobsters.
well, Alex, I found Mrs. Chris's contact information on the website for the Lobster Institute, and she's going to help us learn about lobsters today. So do you want to start off by asking her a question? Let's go ahead and leave that down there so it doesn't interfere with the camera. You want to start off by asking her a question?
Oh, yeah, sure. So, Mrs. Chris, tell us about the work of the Lobster Institute and how you got involved.
Sure. So the Lobster Institute's an organization that's part of the University of Maine. That's where we're located in the state of Maine. And our mission is to collaborate with the lobster industry, its members, the resource managers, policymakers in New England and Canada. And our whole goal is to support a healthy and profitable lobster fishery. And we do that through a lot of different ways. We convene meetings, bringing fishermen and scientists together to discuss potential projects and ongoing collaborative research. And we do educational outreach to share our findings and hope to expose students of all ages about the history and the successes of the lobster fishery and what we need to do to keep it that way.
And how did you get involved?
I got involved. So I was a commercial fisherman. So I used to have my own boat. I started as a sternman, and a sternman means the person that works in the stern of the boat or in the back of the boat. And I did that for 6 years before I got my own boat, and I was a captain for 8 years. before I was injured and had to stop fishing. So had a good run, but I couldn't have asked for a better job. If you can't be fishing, at least I still get to work with fishermen and all the things that go with it.
Okay, well, great.
Okay, here's another question. Do lobsters have personalities, Miss Chris?
Well, that's a really hard one to tell. I mean, they are feisty to a certain degree more than each other, or they're more docile. I think a lot of it has mostly to do with the fact that where they are in their molt cycle or what they were doing when you caught them. So like some come up in traps and they're like, they're so mad because they got caught, and they're all feisty, and that could mean, you know, like they just have a lot of energy. They've got a hard shell. So if they come up and they're all sluggish and tired and limp, they may have just molted, or that's when they shed their shell or their exoskeleton. And that's so that they might be weak and not have a lot of energy. So I think their personalities are more dependent on sort of what's going on with them biologically, but they're not, I mean, they're kind of mean to each other. So they're not like really happy-go-lucky little lobsters walking around together on the bottom of the ocean floor. They eat each other, they fight with each other. So that's kind of their personality.
So when you say they eat each other, is that only when they're going through the molting?
They certainly eat each other's skeletons and exoskeletons, but they're molts. But they'll fight and eat each other any time of day.
Anytime.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Okay.
All right. What parts of a lobster can regrow if lost?
So their claws for certain. They can regrow their claws, they can regrow their legs, they can regrow their antennae.
And if they lose that body part, like the antennae in particular, does it always grow back as an antenna?
Yeah, I mean, it's gonna grow back right there. And then,
Okay.
I don't know the ratio of if it always grows back, but it has the ability to grow back if it's not, too damaged.
Okay. What you got next?
Well, when it loses a claw and grows a new one, does the new one ever catch up in size?
It can, but it takes a few molts. So like a lobster molts, say like once a year or once every other year. And so like the first times it will be really tiny, and it'll take like up to 3 years or maybe it's only 3 molts, if I can remember correctly, to catch up to the size of the other one.
Yeah, that's pretty cool. Okay.
How many different species of lobsters are in Maine waters?
One. It's the Homerus americanus. That's all we got.
And how far does it stretch? Because you mentioned Canada earlier. How far north and south does it stretch?
It goes like all the way down to like probably Virginia, I believe, is kind of the lowest area. And I'm not sure how many they actually get down there anymore. And then all the way up to, beyond Canada, up to Atlantic, the upper Atlantic Canada area.
And so you said Americanus, I think, in there somewhere.
Homerus americanus.
So does that mean that that's the only spot in the world that these lobsters are?
Yep.
Okay.
That's where we are.
That one.
What environment is the ideal habitat? It just got lost.
Sure. No. So when they settle, so lobsters, when they hatch from the eggs, they kind of float around in the water column for about 4 weeks until they settle in the bottom of the ocean floor. And when they're juveniles in that 4th stage, they really like to be, in the hiding in the rocks and the mud to, protect themselves and stay hidden. And then as they get bigger and older, they move around, but they do like a rocky habitat when they're younger, and they don't really migrate much. They kind of stick relatively close to the area in which they've settled. So rocky, I would say, cold in Maine. We like the cold water, so they like to settle in the cold deep water, or the warmer deep water as it goes out. So in the winter they go out to deeper water, and in the summer they come into shallower water to molt, and then regrow their shell, and then they go back out to deeper water again in that cycle.
So you said they were real prone to fighting with each other. It could be. So does that mean they live pretty solitary, or?
They do, yeah, except when they're mating.
Okay.
Yeah, very much so.
Are there specific times a lobster molts? Do they all molt at the same time?
So they all molt in the summertime, but they all molt like anywhere between like traditionally it's been in our area June to August, but there's still outliers on the outside of that in any range. But they do molt, especially when they're younger, they're molting once a year, but then the males will molt once a year and the females generally every other year. So no, not at the same time, but generally the same time a year.
And does that affect the fishing of them, the harvest of them at all?
Sure. Yeah. I mean, like, so you get a lot of them. So when they're coming in from offshore and they're coming into shallower water, they're coming into molt and they need food to regrow their shell. So they're hungry and they want to run into those traps and get the bait. And so it affects fishing in that way. So that's why traditionally, like, it's a big summer fishery, although really the best lobsters and the most that the fishermen are landing are really in November and December are the months when their shells are hardening up and they're running and they're going out offshore to deeper water. But yeah, traditionally a lot are caught, especially in the summer, and they don't have the ability to travel as far because their shell is softer. So they're more either eaten and sold at our, at a lobster bake or at we have all up and down the coast, our lobster wharves, or they're sent to processing facilities and then their meat is picked and sold in that way instead of shipped live.
Oh, okay, I got you. Okay, what you got next?
Are there lobster hatcheries that produce lobsters until they get past a highly vulnerable stage? If not, why not?
There are not yet, I guess I would say. It's not been cost effective. Basically, it comes down to the bottom line is that it would not be profitable because it does take 7 to 8 years for a lobster to get to the legal size that you're allowed to harvest it. So that's a long time of having to keep a lobster fit. Well, they filter feed, so you don't have to feed them so much as keeping them cold, keeping them oxygenated, and storage. And we just have had such a really successful and robust fishery that we have not needed to do that. And it really wouldn't make any sense because of the costs. There has been a lot of efforts to have hatcheries and setting off juvenile lobsters at a very, at their fourth stage or one, along those lines, but there's little to no knowledge of how much that has impacted the fisheries. They're certainly ahead of us in Europe and trying the hatchery efforts. They have a very small lobster fishery, so they might actually be able to see more of a effect in a realistic amount of time, or amount of time that would be helpful to know if it's successful. But we have not done it yet, and there's been a lot of trials. There's been many efforts, but none have gone further.
Yeah. Well, we like hearing that it's a healthy and sustainable fishery right now. That's the best.
Right.
So,
yeah. Right. And there's lots of things, working against us, but right now it's a strong fishery.
What's the next question, Allie?
What are some of the best practices in sustaining lobster populations?
So what we're already doing, like what we've been doing for a very long time. So in at least in Maine, and the conservation measures do vary, whether it's Canada or Massachusetts or New Hampshire, but the basic measures that we've done for over 100 years in most cases is our V-notching, which is when you put a V-notch in one of the flippers of a female lobster. When it comes up in the trap and it has eggs on it, if the fisherman sees that a lobster has eggs, you have to put a V-notch in it and put it back in the ocean. So that way it can always be a breeding female. And that way it saves, has that breeding female always in the water. It can't get caught. It can't get sold. Yay. So it's going to always be producing eggs. And then the other measure that we have is our minimum and maximum gauge size. So that's how we measure a lobster from its carapace or its back. And you measure from its eye socket to the back of its carapace. And the minimum size, it has to be 3 1/4 inches, or it has to be no smaller than 3 1/4 inches and no bigger than 5 inches. And so this really, and that's in Maine. There's no max measure in Massachusetts and in some other places, but that's in Maine. And that really keeps our young ones growing and keeps our brood stocks breeding. And that's just been a long observed, wonderful conservation measures that have started back as early as the 1800s in both cases. But really, we're kind of looking at what we have in place now on both fronts, about 100 years of both of, and with different variables of changing, and we have change coming on the horizon of increasing our minimum gauge size. But what we've been doing has made our fishery very successful, and really, we're really proud of the conservation efforts that the Maine fishermen have been adhering to, and in many cases being proponents of, or informing how we should be practicing our conservation efforts. So we're really proud of what we've done and how we've sustained our fishery for so long.
That piece of metal is a piece. What do you think?
I think it's correct.
Do you think it's correct? I'm not confirmed.
Connecting.
So that one's good. What about this one? Stick it in inside. Just like that.
That one seems a little bit smaller.
That one is a little bit smaller. So if it wiggles, you gotta throw it back.
I had no idea some of those rules were 100 years. And
Yeah.
I believe we heard that, like we fish here in Oklahoma, just go fishing, but to catch lobsters, you have to have a commercial license. Is that correct?
That's
Okay.
correct. So they do have what we call a recreational license in the state of Maine. So anybody can apply and get a license that allows you to fish 5 traps.
Okay.
And then depending on where you fish in Maine, we have what we call lobster zones. We have our lobster zone councils. And depending on the council you're in, your maximum trap limit is either 600 or 800 traps. So that's to give you a sense of how many traps people are fishing. But so if you want a recreational license, you can fish up to 5.
Okay. And then talking about the traps and fishing, I guess in my head, I kind of thought of it as mostly summertime, but you were talking about in November and December. So, and
Yeah.
deep water. So I'm thinking cold, deep waters, but is it pretty much a year round? Is there?
It is a year-round fishery. Yeah, there's a few. I actually come from the one place that's a closed season. I fished on an island 12 miles off the coast, and we only fished in the winter. So our season started in October and ended in May. And that was so that's the only closed season in the whole state of Maine, but otherwise everybody else can fish year round. The majority of people fish, I would say, from July until January.
Yeah, and then the best one was saved for last. What is your favorite surprising fact about lobsters?
So this is one I just learned, and I hope it's right. I was looking for a educational handout. I was going to a festival and I was like, oh, what would kids like? What can I find? And I found the New Hampshire Seacoast Science Center on their website had surprising facts about lobsters. And one of them was that lobsters smell with their feet. And I was like, oh, that's very cool. Because like the little short hairs all around their pinchers and their walking legs, they use it for sensors. I mean, they do smell with their antennae too, but they also smell with all those little hairs on their feet. So I thought that's really cool. I had not heard that one before.
That's handy for finding food, isn't it?
Yeah.
A lobster's sense of smell is so good that it can detect a single amino acid from their favorite food.
Thanks, Miss Cash, for answering my lobster questions. Thank you.
Thanks
Thank
very much for
you.
your time. We really appreciate it.
It was nice to meet you. Have a great day and good luck with all your other adventures.
Thank you.
Too.
Take care.
Maine is beautiful with many great places to visit. If you go, don't miss out on taking your own lobster adventure.
If you do, I hope you have as much fun as we did. See you on our next adventure.